Elaine's birthday dinner was at one of those rooftop spots with dim lighting and overpriced cocktails, the kind of place that makes insecure people feel important. She picked it, said it was grown-up. I wore the charcoal jacket she bought me last year, the one she said made me look less retired, more alive. I didn't realize she meant it as a warning. The table was already half loaded when I got there. Her friends, Carol, Tanya, June, each with their painted-on laughs and empty husbands. They used to smile when I paid the check. Now they smiled before I even sat down. Elaine raised her glass. Well, would you look who finally decided to grace us with his spreadsheets and Sears catalog fashion. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. The table roared. Carol snorted her mojito through her nose. I pulled out the chair, sat. Didn't even try to laugh. Just reached for the water and took in the skyline. Downtown shimmered below like a memory I couldn't quite place. Somewhere in that glitter was the version of Elaine I used to know. The one who once kissed me over gas station coffee and called me her quiet anchor. Dinner began with a toast and ended with a public execution. First it was the jokes about how I still used MapQuest and once wore socks with sandals in Miami. Harmless. Then it turned surgical. Tanya leaned over and smirked. Elaine, does he still talk about that engine patent like it matters? Elaine waved a hand, sipped her wine, and said it like she was tossing scraps to dogs. He still thinks a gas station tuna sandwich counts as lunch. That's when I noticed. They weren't laughing with her. They were laughing at me, but through her. She wasn't defending me. She was performing. Like this was some sad little roast, and I was the clown in the middle of it. I looked at her, really looked, and realized she hadn't held my hand all night. She hadn't even looked me in the eye. The waiter came by with the bill. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared. No, not because I expected this exact humiliation, but because I'd been listening for months. Watching. Waiting. Patterns always emerge if you're patient. Put it all on this, I said, handing over the card and envelope. He looked confused. Sir, there's also a note in here. It's for the lady of the evening, I said. Make sure she gets it after I'm gone. Elaine didn't even notice. She was too busy trying to one-up Carol's story about her vacation in Cabo. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and looked at my wife of 16 years. She didn't flinch. Didn't ask where I was going. Didn't care. That part hit the hardest. Harder than the jokes, harder than the silence. It was the absence of concern that burned. I left the rooftop bar. Didn't look back. The elevator ride down felt like peeling off dead skin. I stepped onto the sidewalk and walked straight into the night, pulling out my phone. A few taps later, I triggered a chain I'd been assembling for weeks. The safe at home? Emptied. The Wi-Fi? Disconnected. The utilities? Scheduled for cancellation at midnight. Our joint accounts? Already in the red. My name was off the mortgage. Her name? Still on all the bills. At exactly 1:14 a.m., I removed her as a beneficiary from my pension and insurance. The app even congratulated me on the update like I'd just changed my password. I guess, in a way, I had. By the time Elaine got home, the power was flickering. The internet was down. The alarm code had been changed. And in the safe where she once kept her designer jewelry, and our will, she found a single Polaroid photo. It was of the two of us, back when she used to smile like I mattered. I'd drawn a black line through my face. No note. No explanation. She would figure it out soon enough. Elaine's morning began with the smell of burnt toast and a dead iPad. She tapped the screen twice, then harder. Nothing. Wi-Fi was still out. Her bedroom light flickered overhead like it was unsure whether it wanted to exist. She muttered something about cheap wiring and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The fridge hummed, but the espresso machine blinked error in red. That's when her phone buzzed, 5 times in a row. Tanya, is your Chase card down too? June, tell me Martin didn't do something. I can't get into the investment portal. Carol, wait. Did he block us or something? Why is my rent payment bouncing? Elaine blinked. Scrolled. It was like watching a string of firecrackers go off. Ping, ping, ping. Notifications erupted. Emails from her bank, her credit monitoring app, and Apple Pay. One by one. Account access denied. Joint checking account closed. Your scheduled mortgage payment failed. Login attempt failed. Password recently changed. Her mouth went dry. She ran upstairs to the office and yanked open the bottom drawer where they kept backup files and their checkbook. Empty. Not, I misplaced it, empty. Deliberately cleared empty. Like someone had vacuumed the soul out of their finances. She grabbed her keys, only to realize her keys weren't there. Martin's duplicates were missing too. A shadow passed the window. She turned. A sleek black tow truck backed into the driveway. A man in a gray polo stepped out and headed toward the garage. He was calm. Professional. Ma'am, he said without looking at her. We're here for the infinity. Lease default. It's standard procedure. She blinked. Default? We've never missed a payment. He looked at his tablet. Ma'am, the auto debit was canceled last night. Less than 24 hours ago. Says here the primary account holder is no longer associated with this lease. Elaine laughed, sharp and fake. That's ridiculous. I'm the primary. No, ma'am, he cut in. Martin Ellison is listed as the sole primary. You're a secondary operator. The words hit like acid. She stood there, wrapped in a silk robe she bought with his card, watching a stranger drive away in the car she thought was hers. She called Martin. No response. Called again. Straight to voicemail. Third time, she got the robotic. The number you've dialed is no longer in service. She slammed the phone on the counter and opened her laptop, forgotten it needed Wi-Fi. She hotspot through cellular, only to find that plan had been canceled too. Mid-scroll, her phone dropped to 1 bar. Then none. The silence around her was no longer peaceful. It was strategic. Panic hadn't sunk in fully yet. It was still dawning. She thought maybe it was some banking glitch. Maybe someone hacked them. Martin would fix it. He always did. But he wasn't here. He wasn't anywhere. She finally tried the bank directly, waiting 17 minutes on hold before someone flatly confirmed. Yes, ma'am. All linked accounts under Martin Ellison were closed as of 12:01 this morning. There are no accessible funds in your name. Her hands shook. But what about the joint credit line? The mortgage auto payments? Your name was removed from those accounts. I'm sorry. Are you saying you weren't informed? She hung up before she could hear another syllable. Her face was flushed, her throat tight. The world was shifting beneath her, one login failure at a time. Then came the kicker. June called. Not a text. A full call. Elaine, I just got declined trying to pay for my daughter's medication. Martin was managing that fund, remember? The group pool. Elaine tried to speak. Nothing came out. You told us he was a joke. Broke. Said he was bad with money. But he's the one who set up that damn portfolio, Elaine. And now it's frozen. June's voice wasn't panicked. It was furious. Elaine stood in her dark kitchen, barefoot, robe fluttering from the fan's weak breath, watching every thread of her life unravel. Finances, friends, control. All gone before noon. Martin hadn't shouted. He hadn't slammed a door. He just disappeared. And now the silence was everywhere. Elaine used to joke that Martin was her accountant with benefits. It sounded cute at brunch, funny, even empowering. He never argued. He'd smile, sip his coffee, and keep paying the bill. And the taxes. And the mortgage. And her friend's Airbnb on that girl's trip to Austin. When they moved in together 12 years ago, she handed him a shoebox full of unopened credit card bills and said, "Here. I suck at this." He built her a spreadsheet empire. Passwords, budgets, alerts, all color-coded, all synced. She laughed at it once, called it financial OCD. He nodded and paid off her Nordstrom card behind her back. She never asked how it happened, only that it did. No? The house was cold. Not metaphorically, actually cold. She went to turn up the heat, and the thermostat blinked offline. The PG&E site wouldn't load. She tried logging in, but the password had changed. So she clicked forgot password, and the email never came. Then she remembered. It was Martin's email. Always had been. She texted him again. Delivered. No response. Then she noticed the name had changed in her contacts. Just said M. Her Spotify went silent. Netflix logged her out. Hulu asked for payment. Even DoorDash rejected her saved card. She laughed, but it cracked in the middle. The kind of laugh people mistake for choking. She reached for her phone and dialed Tanya. It rang once. Twice. Picked up. Elaine. Hold on, just, then yelling in the background. A male voice, deep and annoyed. Elaine frowned. Tanya. The line scrambled. Sorry, my landlord's here. Says my rent didn't go through. I'm showing him the confirmation now. Martin said it was automated. What the hell is going on, Elaine? Wait, your rent. Tanya hissed into the phone. You said he was a mess, remember? That he couldn't manage a damn checkbook. That the guy who wears pleated khaki shouldn't handle real money. So tell me, why was he the one managing my rental fund? Elaine blinked. You gave Martin access to that? You told me to, Tanya snapped. You said he's boring, but he's reliable. So I looped him in last year when I went freelance. You knew that. Don't act dumb now. Elaine's voice lowered. Tanya, I didn't know it was still going through him. Well, it was, she bit back. Until today. Now the landlord's threatening eviction. And guess what? You get to explain it, since you made him the group's money guy. The call cut out. Elaine checked her screen. No SIM, it said. Service terminated. She hit redial. Nothing. Dead. She stared at the phone, then grabbed her coat and keys, what was left of her power, and bolted to her car. Or what had been their car. She'd forgotten. Repossessed. She opened the Uber app. Login failed. She walked. 3 miles in freezing wind, makeup smeared, coat open, shoes biting into the backs of her ankles. She arrived at Tanya's condo, chest heaving, hair stuck to her lip gloss. Tanya was out front in sweats, arms crossed, arguing with her landlord over a printed invoice and a frozen bank account. The look she gave Elaine wasn't confusion. It was betrayal. You lied, Tanya said, before Elaine could even open her mouth. I didn't know. I swear. Yes, you did. Or you didn't care. Same thing. Elaine started to speak, but Tanya turned to the landlord and muttered, We'll wire it. Give me till tomorrow. Then stormed back inside, leaving the door half shut behind her. Elaine stood there in the wind, the door creaking slowly until it clicked shut. She was supposed to be the sinner. The queen bee. The one they all came to for advice, for brunch plans, for the next couple's trip to Tahoe. Now she was just a woman in designer boots she couldn't afford anymore, standing outside someone else's condo, realizing she'd never held the power she thought she had. Martin never yelled. Never fought. He just owned everything. Quietly. And now? She wasn't just shut out. She was erased. Elaine had always assumed her friendships were bulletproof, anchored by group chats, shared spa days, and synchronized gossip rotations. They weren't friendships, not really. They were alliances. And like any alliance, they worked until the money ran out. 3 days after Martin vanished, the brunch group met, not at the usual vineyard, but in the back of a soulless suburban cafe with plastic table numbers and cracked vinyl seats. No mimosas this time. Just tension thick enough to spread on toast. Elaine walked in wearing sunglasses too large for the dim light, hoping to reclaim the queenly posture she used to own effortlessly. But no one stood to greet her. No air kisses. Just cold stares over chipped mugs of diner coffee. She sat slowly, tried to smile. Ladies, I know it's been a weird week. Cut the crap, Tanya snapped, arms crossed. Elaine blinked. Excuse me. Carol leaned forward. You said he was broke. Freeloading. Living off your income and your grace. You laughed about it, remember? Said he once used a coupon on a first date. We all called him Coupon Carl behind his back, because of you. June, quiet and pale, pulled a folder from her tote and slid it across the table. Elaine opened it. A ledger. Her name. Martin's name. Multiple entries. What is this? Investment breakdown, June said flatly. You told me to let him manage it. Said he was obsessive enough to make it grow. So I gave him access. My emergency fund. It was supposed to mature in December. Elaine felt her throat tighten. June, I didn't think he'd actually. But he did, June cut in. And now it's locked. He closed the entire account 2 nights ago. And not just mine. Carol's too. Carol's eyes were wet, but not from sadness. Rage. My daughter's tuition. Gone. I trusted you. You made him sound like a joke. So we underestimated him. But you didn't, did you? Not really. You just wanted us to see him how you saw him beneath you. Elaine tried to fight it. He never even told me about your accounts. Of course he didn't, Tanya hissed. Because he's not stupid. But you? You lit the match and handed it to us like it was a damn candle. Elaine's voice dropped. I didn't know this would happen. But you knew he could do it, June said. You knew he was the one keeping everything afloat. And you humiliated him anyway. Publicly. Like he was replaceable. They weren't angry because their money was gone. They were angry because they'd trusted her to know better, and she'd fed them lies wrapped in Chardonnay. The silence stretched. Elaine looked around the table, her throne room, her audience, and saw strangers with clenched jaws and broken balances. You don't get it, do you? Carol said, voice shaking. This wasn't revenge. This was a withdrawal. He didn't just leave. He extracted himself. From you. From us. From this whole rotten orbit. Tanya nodded slowly. And you're the reason he pulled the plug. Elaine stood up, breath shaky. So what? You all want to blame me for trusting the man I married? June stood too. No. We're blaming you for using him like scaffolding, then kicking at it because you thought the building would hold. Elaine turned to leave. By the way, Tanya called after her. We're starting a new group chat. You're not in it. Elaine didn't turn around. She pushed open the door, sunlight harsh and unforgiving, and walked into a world that looked the same, but where she no longer had a seat at the table. Elaine hadn't driven this route in years, not since Martin's mother had her hip replaced and stopped hosting holidays. The neighborhood was quiet, quaint, the kind of place where curtains twitch when an unfamiliar car rolls by too slowly. She used to hate it. Said it smelled like old wood and resignation. Now, it smelled like possibility, like maybe he'd be here. She'd already called everywhere. His old firm had no forwarding information, just a polite, Mr. Ellison no longer works with us. That sounded like a velvet slap. His brother Brian, ever the bulldog, answered once. Said, he asked us not to talk to you, and hung up before she could pivot into her usual manipulative charm. Even the accountant, the one who did their taxes 3 years ago, claimed client confidentiality. She tried everything short of hiring a private investigator, and even then, she considered it. But Martin had always been 3 moves ahead. If he wanted to disappear, he would do it in a way that made noise after the exit. So now she sat parked across from the Ellison house, heart thudding like she was 16 again, spying on some high school rival. Her old Camry idled beside a blooming dogwood tree, air freshener barely masking the stale smell of desperation. That's when she saw it. A delivery truck. Big. White. No logo. The kind you rent when you don't want attention. 2 men wheeled a velvet armchair down the ramp. She squinted. That chair. That was her chair. The navy one Martin used to say looked like something a 1940s mobster would smoke cigars in. She hadn't seen it since the move. He must have stored it. And now? He was unpacking it. The front door opened. A woman stepped out barefoot, holding a steaming mug. Laughing. Elaine's stomach turned. Not just because the woman was young, though she was. Late 30s, maybe. But because of what she was wearing. Martin's sweatshirt. Not just any sweatshirt, the faded black one from their trip to Lake Tahoe, with the fraying sleeves and coffee stain near the hem. The one Elaine tried to throw out every winter. He always rescued it from the donation bin, muttering, some things still fit, even when they're worn. And now? This stranger was wearing it. She stood on the porch like she belonged there. Mug in one hand, free hand gesturing as she laughed at something the movers said. Easy. Relaxed. Comfortable in the kind of way Elaine hadn't felt around Martin in years. A dog, a golden retriever, maybe, trotted out behind her. Jumped up briefly. She bent, kissed its head, sipped from the mug again. Like this was her house? Like she'd always been here. Elaine gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. She wanted to believe this woman was some niece, some friend, someone just helping Martin redecorate his mother's place. But deep down, she knew better. Because on the porch rail, in plain sight, was a stack of envelopes. The top one bore a return address. It wasn't Martin's mother's name. It was Martin's, and a different last name next to it. Hyphenated. She squinted. Couldn't read the full thing. But it was enough. He'd changed addresses. He'd changed names. He'd changed people. Elaine slumped back in the seat, numb, watching the woman disappear inside. The porch light clicked on automatically behind her, even though it was still daylight. She wasn't just locked out of his accounts. She was locked out of his life. And the part that bit hardest? That woman hadn't taken her place. She'd always had it. Elaine just never noticed. Elaine waited 2 full hours in that parked car, hidden behind a pair of oversized sunglasses and a cup of cold brew she didn't drink. When the woman finally emerged, she was carrying a leather tote and walking with the kind of unhurried calm Elaine hadn't felt since, well, probably never. She tailed her, carefully. Far enough behind to avoid suspicion, close enough to watch her hair bounce with every step like some damn shampoo commercial. The woman didn't look back once. Of course not. People who belong somewhere rarely do. She parked outside a storefront Elaine had walked past a dozen times downtown, some cute little boutique that sold overpriced linen dresses and ceramic mugs with ironic sayings. Elaine had never stepped inside. She found stores like that exhausting, pretentious. But today? Today, she followed the woman in. The place smelled like eucalyptus and quiet confidence. A bell dingled as they entered, and the young clerk behind the counter, maybe 25, maybe barely paid, looked up and smiled. "Morning, Lydia." Lydia. So now the ghost had a name. "Morning, love," Lydia said warmly. She set her tote behind the register like it was second nature. "You're opening tomorrow, right? Don't let me forget the plant Martin picked up." Elaine froze in front of a rack of knit cardigans. Her ears rang. The clerk smiled. "The ficus." Lydia chuckled. "Yeah, he said it's feng shui. I told him, you're a mechanical engineer, not a monk. But you know how he gets. When he decides something should be done right, he does it by the book." Elaine's fingers tightened around the price tag of a dress she had no intention of buying. She could feel her nails bite into the soft linen. The girl laughed. "He's the best. Seriously. I don't know how you landed him, but keep him around." "Oh, I planned to," Lydia said. She leaned on the counter, voice casual. "He helped set this place up, you know. Did all the back-end structure. Accounting, utilities, even the website. I just picked the wallpaper." Elaine didn't remember breathing after that. Martin set this up? The same man who once sighed over a $40 wine bottle? The man who told her they couldn't swing a second car because the market was too unstable? The same man who used to double-check the grocery bill? He'd funded a boutique? With eucalyptus candles and imported ceramics and soft jazz playlists? For her? Elaine moved slowly through the aisles now, hands shaking ever so slightly as she traced the edge of a handmade bowl. There was a price tag beneath it, $189. She nearly laughed. He used to raise his eyebrows when she bought candles at HomeGoods. Now he was bankrolling essential oil emporiums. And this Lydia, this woman with the linen dress and soft tone, wasn't new. No one calls a man incredible after 2 weeks of dating. No one builds a business with a stranger. No one wears an old sweatshirt that comfortably unless they've stolen it slowly, over time. Elaine felt something crack. Not a scream. Not even anger. Obsession. This woman hadn't replaced her. She'd existed alongside her. Like mold behind wallpaper. Quiet. Patient. Martin hadn't left Elaine for Lydia. He had just waited for Elaine to make it easy. And she had. God, she had. Birthday dinners and public insults, calling him boring, dismissing his ideas, treating him like a relic of her past instead of the foundation of her life. Now someone else lived in the house she decorated, wore the sweatshirt she folded, and ran a business he built. Elaine walked out of the store without buying anything. She didn't even hear the bell this time. Her vision tunneled. There wasn't pain anymore. There was only one thought, circling like blood in water. How long had he been planning this? Elaine sat at the corner table on the rooftop, exactly where it had all unfolded 6 weeks ago. The same restaurant. Same skyline. Same cursed tablecloth pattern, white with pale green stripes like a hospital trying to look festive. She'd made the reservation under her maiden name. Didn't want to risk the staff whispering or remembering too quickly. But the moment she stepped onto the rooftop, one of the servers glanced up and stiffened. Not rudely, but like someone who'd just recognized a car crash survivor walking into traffic again. They didn't seat her. They installed her. Quietly, like a live exhibit. She didn't order anything but a glass of wine. Same as that night. A Pinot she used to mock Martin for choosing the safe option, she'd called it. Now it tasted like guilt. The city lights were brighter tonight. Or maybe she just hadn't noticed them last time, too busy laughing at jokes she'd orchestrated at his expense. She could remember it perfectly now, the way Martin had barely touched his steak. The polite smile as they took turns chipping away at his dignity. The way her friends had leaned in, eager, like wolves finally tasting the throat. And she had led them. That line about the tuna sandwich? It wasn't even original. She'd said it once, teasingly, years ago when they were driving through Nevada, laughing over a cooler of gas station snacks. He'd grinned then, told her she could insult anything but the sandwich. And here she was. She'd weaponized even that memory. She stared down at the empty place across from her. His chair, still tucked in, still untouched, like he might stroll up late with that soft, worn jacket and a faint smile. She remembered him handing the envelope to the waiter. That part stuck. At the time, she'd thought nothing of it. Maybe an extra tip, maybe a coupon. It was Martin, after all. But now it felt like a message wrapped in linen. The waiter that night had looked at the envelope like it wasn't just cash. He'd glanced at Martin, then Elaine, then back at the envelope. There was something like surprise, and maybe pity. Why hadn't she clocked it then? Why hadn't she seen anything? Because she hadn't been looking. She thought Martin was predictable. The loyal Labrador. You kick him, he limps, he stays. But she'd forgotten something critical. Labradors bite when pushed hard enough. She sipped the wine again, set it down. A different waiter came by and offered the menu. She waved him off, then paused. "Hey," she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you remember a man, older, quiet, gray hair, sat here about a month ago?" The waiter nodded slowly. "With a group of women?" "Yeah, I remember. Do you know what was in the envelope he gave your colleague?" He hesitated. "Professional boundaries. Company policy. He asked us to make sure you got the best service that night," the waiter said carefully. "And he prepaid everything. Not just the meal. Gratuity, too. Generous. And the man trailed off. "What?" He wrote a note. "Told us not to interrupt if things got awkward. Said you'd be performing." Elaine's mouth went dry. "Performing," she echoed. The waiter gave her a sympathetic nod and left. She sat there for a while longer, watching couples come and go, the laughter now sharp instead of distant. That night hadn't been a breakdown. It had been a curtain drop, and Martin had already walked off stage. The envelope came on a Tuesday. No return address, but the paper was thick, legal stock. She knew the feel before she opened it, knew the weight of things sealed inside. Elaine had received plenty of letters over the years, credit statements, social invites, bills, but nothing that made her fingers go cold just holding it. She stood at the kitchen counter, the room dim and unfriendly, and slid a butter knife beneath the flap. The first page was from a law office. Names sounded like something out of a noir film. Weissman and Crane, LLP. Very official, very final. She read the first paragraph 3 times before she understood it wasn't a warning. It was an end. This letter serves as notification of full severance between Mr. Martin Ellison and Ms. Elaine Baxter, effective immediately. As per the terms enclosed, Mr. Ellison waives claim to any shared assets acquired during the course of the marriage. No alimony is requested. All liabilities and joint accounts have been lawfully closed. The matter is considered resolved. No alimony, no fight, no trial, no mediation, no discussion. Just done. But it was the second document that made her legs go weak. A notarized statement. Her own signature. Scanned and attached. I, Elaine Baxter, acknowledge the use of joint marital funds totaling $27,819 over the course of 2 years for personal leisure trips, entertainment, and purchases unrelated to shared household needs, made without the informed consent of my spouse. She gasped. That was a draft she'd scribbled years ago, back when Martin asked her to be honest before tax season. He never filed it. Said, "We'll fix it together." She laughed, threw it in a drawer. He had kept it, used it, weaponized it. There was a note from his attorney beneath the statement. Mr. Ellison has elected not to pursue legal action regarding these funds. This offer is contingent on your full agreement to permanent no contact. Any violation will reopen financial liability and public disclosure. Your silence is your immunity. She couldn't breathe. She flipped the last page over, hands trembling. It wasn't legalese. It was a photo. Martin, standing outside a modern single-story house with steel beams and redwood paneling, somewhere sunny. His arm around Lydia, the boutique woman, her hand resting gently on his chest, like it had always been there. He looked relaxed, not smiling like a man in a forced portrait. Content. No ring on his finger. No message on the back. But in the corner of the image, Clipped to the paper with a black binder clip was a printed address. A business address. Lydia's Boutique. No note. No threat. Just the final proof. He wasn't hiding. He was unreachable. He had no interest in punishing her. No interest in yelling, or vindication, or closure. Martin had simply removed her, like a surgeon cutting away a tumor with precision and no fanfare. She sat down on the floor, legs folded beneath her like a collapsed chair. The letter fluttered to the tile beside her. For the first time in her adult life, Elaine felt something she couldn't strategize out of, flirt her way past, or explain into nothingness. She wasn't being punished. She was being forgotten. Deliberately, quietly, and permanently. The lawsuit notice arrived in an email with the subject line, "Formal filing notification, breach of contract." No, hi Elaine, no pleasantries. Just a timestamp, a case number, and June's name in bold black letters. Elaine opened it with a grimace and scanned fast, legalese pouring over her like acid rain. Breach of fiduciary duty. Failure to disclose risk and shared financial engagement. Negligent misrepresentation. June hadn't just turned. She'd gone nuclear. It was over the investment Martin had managed for them, what had started as a casual wine night idea, a pooled fund that could all dip into for events, emergencies, girls' trips. Martin offered to handle the numbers, the tracking. They laughed, called him the group's human Excel sheet. Now June was suing Elaine for misrepresenting Martin's reliability, claiming she'd knowingly led her into financial entanglement under false pretenses. In other words, you lied about your husband being a loser, and we bet our money on it. The same day, Elaine opened Instagram. Tanya's account? Gone. Carol's? Private. June's? Radio silence. Their group chat, Sangria Syndicate, used to buzz all day with memes, complaints about aging, and badly lit selfies. Now? Dead thread. Last message, Elaine asking, anyone want to do Napa next weekend? Read by all. Replied to by none. By Friday, the rumors had spread beyond their circle. Elaine stopped by her esthetician, only to be told her appointment had been rescheduled indefinitely. Translation, we don't want your drama in the waiting room. She ran into a mutual acquaintance at the grocery store, a woman named Marcy who once begged Elaine for party planning tips and got a polite nod followed by a U-turn toward frozen vegetables. Even the yoga studio sent an automated cancellation notice. Your payment could not be processed. Please update your billing information. She knew better. The card worked elsewhere. Then came Carol's implosion. A text at 1:03 a.m. Did you tell Martin to cancel our wedding deposit? The florist just pulled out. Said nothing was paid. You swore he handled it. Elaine didn't reply. Not because she didn't have something to say, she did, but because she knew it wouldn't matter. There was no defense that wouldn't make her look guilty, and no apology they believe even if she meant it. At 9:46 the next morning, Tanya's car got towed. BMW, brand new lease, probably on one of the cards Martin had access to through their Girls Get Credit Club Fund, a clever name they once toasted over brunch. Now, it looked like financial fraud, and no one was calling him to complain, because no one could. She tried. She scrolled through her call log, past all the dead texts, found the number she hadn't deleted, but had memorized anyway. Martin Ellison. She hit dial, pressed the phone to her ear. It rang once, then silence. Not voicemail, not a busy tone, just dead air. Like someone had picked up and let the quiet say everything. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then tapped it off and set it down like a bomb that failed to detonate. The worst part wasn't that he didn't answer. It was that he let it ring once, to let her know, I still see you. I just don't care. There was no storm, no climax, just collapse. Elaine stood in the wreckage of a social empire built on curated smiles and carefully edited truths. The brunches, the whispers, the influence, it had all been propped up by a man she called disposable. And when he left, everything else did, too. It was exactly 1 year later. Same rooftop, same table. The birthday reservation had gone through under Elaine Baxter, a name that didn't open doors the way it used to. She wore the same emerald green dress she'd flaunted a year ago. Back then, it hugged her confidence like armor. Tonight, it felt like a borrowed memory. Too tight in the chest, too empty at the sleeves. The hostess seated her without a word. No familiar smiles. No, happy birthday. Just an efficient nod and a laminated menu she didn't open. Elaine ordered the same wine. Pinot, Martin's favorite. She used to mock it for being predictable. But tonight, the flavor hit different. Bitter, like consequence. No one came. Not June. Not Carol. Tanya was on a wellness retreat in Arizona, or at least pretending to be. Elaine hadn't spoken to any of them since the lawsuit. She'd paid a private settlement, sold her Tahoe timeshare, and kept quiet. It didn't matter anymore. They were gone. She was no longer someone worth orbiting. The city skyline blinked around her, glittering with indifference. A year ago, she owned this view, commanded it like a social general. Now she stared through it like someone watching their old life play on mute. She didn't see the waitress until the folded note was already on the table. "Ma'am," the young woman said softly, "this was left for you. About a year ago. He said to only give it to you if you ever came back alone." Elaine looked up sharply. "What?" The girl gently placed the note beside the wine glass. "He paid us to hold it. Said we'd know when to deliver it." Elaine's fingers hovered over it. Cold. She opened the fold slowly, almost mechanically. No signature. No greeting. Just one line, printed in simple black ink. "I paid the bill. You paid the price." Her stomach dropped. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. A final incision. No room to misinterpret, no emotional leakage. Just Martin, still doing what he did best, closing accounts. Her fingers trembled, wine forgotten. She looked around, half expecting someone to be filming this. But the rooftop was quiet. Everyone else was locked in their own dinners, their own birthdays, their own futures. And then movement across the street. Her eyes caught him in profile. Martin, walking, arm casually around Lydia's waist, their steps perfectly in sync. She wore a soft beige sweater and jeans. Nothing extravagant. Just peaceful. She leaned into him as they passed a bookstore window, laughing at something he said. He didn't glance up. Didn't check the rooftop. Didn't look toward the table where Elaine sat frozen with a note in her hand. Because he didn't need to. He knew she'd see him. That was the final move. Not a confrontation. Not a warning. Visibility without acknowledgement. A living ghost passing by the woman who once held every card. Only now, she held a folded note and nothing else. The waitress came back, discreetly placed the check on the table. Elaine stared at it for a long time. No need to calculate. Martin had already paid. A year ago. Elaine pushed the glass away. She didn't finish the wine. It wasn't the rain that soaked the collar of my flannel. It was the spilled coffee I didn't have time to drink before she exploded. "Get out of my life." That was the third time she screamed it. This time with my shaving kit in her hand like a grenade. She hurled it onto the lawn and the zipper split midair, scattering razors and toothpaste across the grass like shrapnel. She wasn't even crying. That's what stuck with me. She wasn't distraught, heartbroken, emotional. She was clean. Cold. Methodical. Like she'd practiced this moment in her head. Like she'd rehearsed this takedown in the mirror. And me? I stood there in my worn slippers, the ones she used to joke about throwing away. Coffee-stained flannel, belt not even buckled yet. I had just walked in from the garage with a wrench in one hand and her favorite garden hose nozzle in the other, fixed, finally, after weeks of her nagging about it. I should have thrown it at her feet and asked if this counted toward emotional labor. But I didn't. I just stood and watched. The neighbors were watching too, behind those beige curtains of suburban silence. The Wilsons next door, their dog stopped barking, and even that felt insulting. On the other side, the McCarthys, probably thinking took her long enough. She threw my monogrammed shirt, the one she bought me for our anniversary 5 years ago, straight into a puddle. It hit with a wet slap. Her wedding ring wasn't on. I noticed that too. Her left hand was bare. Naked. Like it had never belonged to me. "You just take and take. Walter. You never listen." She snapped, voice rising again like a kettle about to whistle. "You think fixing the sink makes you a good husband? You think showing up with groceries and keeping your stupid little lawn trimmed means anything anymore? I want a life. A real one." She looked unrecognizable. Hair still damp from the shower, robe tied tight, face flushed, but not from crying. From freedom. Go stay with your mechanic buddies or whoever the hell you pretend to talk to. I didn't move. Not yet. I looked down at the soggy pile of my life, slowly getting heavier with rain. "Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. There was something about that moment, something cold and mathematical. I knew this wasn't spontaneous. This was premeditated. I could see it in how she aimed. She knew which drawer my passport was in. She had already packed the black duffel I used for business trips. She even put my back brace in there. This wasn't rage. This was a surgical eviction. I bent down, picked up the suitcase, the one with the stitched initials on the leather handle. I took a second to zip it back up, gently, deliberately. She hated that about me. Said I moved too slow, thought too long. That I was a glacier of a man. That I let life happen to me. No, I was watching. That's different. I straightened up, looked at the house, our house, one more time. The porch light flickered. She slammed the door so hard it echoed. Then I heard the deadbolt. Click. That was the part that stung. Not the screaming. Not the rain. Not even the thrown socks that landed in the flower bed I spent all last spring mulching. It was the sound of her locking me out of something I built with my own hands. I walked to my truck. It still smelled like oil and pine air freshener. The only place that hadn't changed since everything else started rotting. I didn't check my phone. Didn't call Eric. Didn't try to understand. I started the engine, and as it rumbled to life, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was behind the window now, just a silhouette, arms crossed. She wasn't watching to see if I'd beg. She was watching to confirm that I wouldn't. And I didn't. Because the thing she never understood, not in 29 years of marriage, not through lean years or fat, was that I never shouted when I was angry. I planned. The tires hissed on the wet asphalt as I pulled off the county road and turned onto the gravel path that led through the woods. The pine branches clawed at the windshield like the forest wanted to check who was coming. But the gate recognized the truck, still the same old rusted Ford I'd parked here 100 times when I needed to get away from the noise of life. The guest house came into view, squat, gray-shingled, with a drooping porch and a single yellow light still flickering on the side. It used to belong to my Uncle Ray, the only man in the family who understood silence the way I did. He left it to me in his will, bless him, with a handwritten note that said, "Every man needs somewhere to disappear when the world gets too loud." I never told Janet. Never saw the point. And now? Now it was the only roof in the world I trusted. I killed the engine and let the quiet settle. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar, gun oil, and dust. The couch had a dip in it from my last visit. The fridge was empty, save for a bottle of whiskey and a lone jar of pickles that had probably expired during the Obama administration. I dropped the duffel by the door, sat down slowly, and unlaced my boots one eyelet at a time. My hands were steady. Too steady. That's when I knew this wasn't grief. This wasn't confusion or shock or even heartbreak. It was something colder. I opened the drawer in the desk beside the window. The lock gave easily. I'd oiled it last winter. Inside was a navy blue folder, thick with neatly labeled tabs and color-coded stickers. On the cover, in my blocky handwriting, transition plan. Not escape plan. I never named it something theatrical. This wasn't fantasy. This was preparation. I booted up the old laptop. No fingerprint scan. No cloud sync. Just offline, raw data. The emails were all there back and forths with my estate attorney, firm in Boston. Drafts of trust agreements, schedules for asset reallocation, Shell LLCs formed 3 years ago. Each line item boring enough to lull a person to sleep, unless you understood what they meant. Janet always thought I was just a cautious man. A man who double-checked the furnace filters and kept backup flashlights in every room. But I'd spent a lifetime watching people lose everything because they trusted comfort, trusted fairness, trusted love to cover legal ground it was never built for. So, I didn't. I dialed Michael first. My lawyer. He picked up on the second ring, like he always did when he saw my name. Walter. We're moving to phase 2. There was a pause. No questions. He knew the file name. Understood, he said. I'll initiate the restructure. Are we keeping the timeline? Accelerated. 72 hours. I'll have the revised paperwork in your inbox tonight. You'll need to sign the digital transfer documents. Next, I called Stephen, my accountant, the only man more paranoid than I was. He always answered in code. Tell me it's just a drill, he muttered. Not this time. He let out a breath. All right. I'll freeze the shared lines and initiate the trust's activation. You want to move the utilities now or stagger them? Now. Everything under the trust tonight. Copy that. Been expecting this, honestly. We hung up without small talk. Then I sat back in the creaky chair and stared out the window. Rain was still falling in sheets, sliding down the glass. In the woods, a deer crossed silently between trees, unaware that anything in the world had changed. And somewhere, 22 miles away, Janet was probably sipping tea on the couch, texting her sister something smug. She'd feel victorious. She'd feel liberated. For now, she didn't know she'd just screamed at the legal owner of the house, the land, the bank accounts, even the utilities were in my name by the time she slammed that door. I wasn't reacting. I was executing. The guest house creaked around me as the storm passed sometime near midnight. I didn't sleep. Not because I couldn't. I've slept through worse. But there was something surgical about the silence in that house, like a vacuum had opened up where my life used to be, and now it was just me and the hum of fluorescent kitchen lights, no longer needed but too tired to shut off. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen. 5 missed calls from a telemarketer. 1 voicemail, Janet screaming, of course, before slamming the phone down. And not a single call or text from Eric. So I called him, straight to voicemail. Eric, I said after the beep. Not gonna say much. Just wanted to hear your voice. Let me know you're all right. I stared at the phone like it owed me something. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. Out of habit, I opened Facebook. I barely use it. I'm one of those likes photos from 2 months ago by accident kind of guys. But I knew Janet posted there. And I had a sinking suspicion she'd started her little PR campaign. It took less than a minute. Finally free. Time to breathe. Herb. That was the status. Simple. Vague enough to seem classy. Passive-aggressive enough to sink its teeth into every mutual friend we had. 72 likes in an hour. Sandra from book club. So proud of you, girl. Her yoga instructor. Freedom looks amazing on you. Even Karen, her old college roommate who once hit on me at a Christmas party, chimed in, you deserve the world. And then I saw it. Eric, proud of you, Mom. I read it once. Thought maybe it was a joke. Read it again. Slower this time. Like maybe if I looked long enough the letters would rearrange themselves into a misunderstanding. They didn't. He was supposed to ask first. Call me. Text. Something. We built his treehouse together when he was 10. I pulled double shifts to pay for his braces. I drove him to college in my old pickup with half the exhaust pipe rattling off and told him to never let anyone make him feel small. And now he was standing on the digital sidelines of my ejection, holding up a virtual banner for the person who threw my life onto wet grass. I didn't throw the phone, didn't yell. That kind of energy is for people who expect someone to catch them when they fall. I already knew no one was coming. Instead, I walked to the bathroom, turned on the light, and looked at myself in the mirror. Gray hair, yes, but the same eyes I've always had. Calm, cold, not a single flicker of confusion left. What hurt wasn't the silence. It was the fact that it felt predictable. Janet always had a way of pulling people into her orbit, like she was the sun and everyone else was lucky to warm their hands at her fire. Eric inherited that warmth, but not the fireproof skin. He never learned that if you stand too close, you'll blister. And now he'd picked his side, or at least the side she sold him first. I turned the light off, walked back to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop again. Enough mourning. The stage was set. The players were in position. My hand wasn't just forced, it was licensed. There's something chilling about being mistaken for weak, when in reality, you were just waiting. She wanted the drama, the explosion, the attention. I gave her silence. But behind it, there was movement. The cursor blinked on the login screen like it was daring me. I typed in the passphrase, a long, ugly string that no one would ever guess, because it wasn't tied to a memory. Just raw, random entropy. That was the point. Security isn't sentiment. The trust account dashboard opened with a faint click. A sea of green check marks. Assets. Holdings. Property schedules. Corporate entities with boring names like Western Tier Holdings LLC and Fieldstone Revocable Trust. All neatly stacked and labeled. The digital vault of my patience. 2 years ago, I paid a man in a glass building with no name on the door $14,000 to make me legally invisible. Janet had been on one of her empowerment retreats at the time. Some 3-day cleanse with crystals and affirmations and a no-phone rule. She came back glowing, talking about how her soul felt unblocked. I nodded and asked her about her trip. She didn't ask what I did while she was gone. She never did. That's when I made the shift. Quietly. No drama. Just slow, deliberate migration. I didn't do it because I didn't love her. I did it because I understood her. Janet had always chased meaning in temporary things. Trends. Poses. Whatever could make her feel seen. Me? I chased structure. Stability. Something that couldn't be yanked out from under me because someone had a mood swing in a kitchen. So the house? Technically not in our name for almost 20 months. It had been transferred to the trust through a limited partnership. I kept paying the mortgage, of course. That's what a good husband does. But the deed sat in a drawer downtown, registered under an entity whose signature line only bore my initials. Utilities? Same story. I rerouted them through a service company in Utah, just a name on a billing statement. Janet thought it was the new energy provider. She didn't ask. She never looked closely at the fine print. The cars? Split. Mine outright. Hers leased through a company card she thought was a gift. The joint savings we once shared? Drained, slowly and methodically, into tax-efficient vehicles with withdrawal penalties and staggered disclosures. I left enough behind to make it look alive, like a body with a faint pulse. Tonight, all that preparation became movement. I navigated to the asset trigger panel, the one I swore I'd never touch unless I had no other choice. I hovered for a moment. My finger didn't tremble. Initiate full control transfer? Yes. Confirm asset shift across all entities? Yes. Mortgage. Flagged for reassignment. Property title. Locked from transfer without trustee override. Janet's name? Gone. Not removed, just never added to begin with. That's the trick. You don't take things away. You make sure they never belonged. Next, I logged into the municipal systems. Water. Power. Gas. Reauthorized access under the holding name. Changed the mailing address. Guesthouse P.O. Box. Added a secondary verification code. By the time the kettle on the stove began to whistle, the house she stood in was no longer her home. Legally, it had always been mine. But now? Functionally, operationally, absolutely, it was a structure she just happened to be standing inside of. I poured myself a cup of black tea and sat back. The ache in my chest wasn't grief. It was the ghost of what I almost believed in. That people stay. That love anchors. That 30 years means something. But Janet wanted freedom. Not boundaries. Not balance. Just freedom. Well, now she had it. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't scream. I just typed. The modern scalpel. Every man should know how to disappear. Every husband should know how to unhook. I hadn't checked her Instagram in over a year. Not since she started posting half-lit yoga selfies and quotes about vibrations like she was auditioning for enlightenment. But that morning, something told me to look. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was instinct, that twitch behind the ribs that tells you a knife is coming before it touches skin. There she was, poolside, smiling wide with her sister, Charlene, the one who always smelled like menthols and used words like manifest, unironically. Matching silk ropes. Cucumber water. Hashtag Soul Care Weekend. Caption, starting over never looked so good. Nail polish sparkles. A red Coach bag in her lap, champagne in her hand, and that smile, the one she used at parties when she wanted everyone to think she was untouched by stress. Like she floated above consequence. I didn't double tap. I didn't comment. I just swiped to the next photo. Another angle. Same pool. Different robe. This one white, embroidered with the Phoenix Club. Spa I'd heard her mention once. One of those boutique joints with scent therapy and silent tea rooms. Charges $600 to rub you with volcanic ash and remind you you're a goddess. I logged into the bank. 3 charges jumped out instantly. 2 from the spa, 1 for the room, 1 for the transcendental treatment package. The last was a boutique in the same town, Rosewood Atelier. $1,130. Joint card. She didn't just cut me out of the house, she was using the shared bloodline to fund her rebirth. The irony hit cold. She was burning down the marriage on a fuel line I was still pumping. I clicked over to the admin panel. Freeze account? Yes. Revoke secondary authorization? Yes. Just like that, the plastic in her purse became decoration. Try to buy another handbag now. Or get a smoothie that costs $20 because it contains adaptogens. Then I opened a separate tab, the Trust Banking Interface. Time for teeth. I composed the email carefully. The trust firm had a protocol, discretionary enforcement if any financial risk to assets occurred. Risk was intentionally vague. It could mean a market downturn, or it could mean a spouse flinging spa receipts like confetti while the estate was mid-transition. Subject, request for immediate trust enforcement. To operations@fieldstonetrust.com. Time, 7:42 a.m. Per Section 6b of our control agreement, I am authorizing emergency enforcement of protective clauses. All linked accounts, including but not limited to joint credit facilities, residual savings pools, and backup overdraft protections, are to be rerouted to Trust Consolidation Path B. Cease any joint access protocols. Do not notify secondary account holders until the transition is complete. Authorization code. Regards. WG. I hit send and stared at the cursor. The feeling wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was maintenance. Like turning off a faulty faucet before it floods the kitchen. You don't gloat. You just do it. I leaned back. The room was quiet, except for the soft tick of the guesthouse clock. Janet would find out within hours, likely standing barefoot in the spa lobby, card declined, eyebrows raised. Maybe she'd laugh it off. Maybe she'd pretend it was an error. That's her move, charm the staff, promise to call the bank, make it everyone else's problem. But the cracks would start forming, not because I took something away, but because the safety net she assumed was there never was. She danced out the door, head held high, believing she'd been the architect of a new chapter. She didn't see that the stage had already been dismantled beneath her. By the time she noticed, the curtain would already be down. The text came at 9:16 p.m., like a lifeline dropped too late into a flood. Dad, Mom's saying you abandoned her. Are you okay? I stared at the message for a full minute before answering. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what not to. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Don't overplay the hand. Let the cards speak. So I typed. I'm fine. Ask her about the house title. Sent. I set the phone down, gently, like it might detonate. Then I poured myself a finger of whiskey from the old bottle I kept in the guesthouse cupboard, back when I thought this place would only ever be an escape, not a bunker. I sat on the porch. The wind had changed warmer now, sticky with the sin of early summer. A cricket started up in the tall grass. Life, uncaring, kept moving. It took 57 minutes before he called. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring twice, not to be dramatic, but to make him feel it. That this conversation didn't belong to him anymore. That the center of gravity had shifted. Dad, he said when I picked up. His voice cracked on the edge of concern and confusion. Evening, I said, calm as oil. I talked to Mom. She says you're trying to steal the house. That you tricked her with some kind of paperwork. What the hell is going on? I took a slow sip, let it burn down before I spoke. I didn't steal anything. I just removed the illusion. What does that even mean? He snapped, the way young men do when they realize the truth might not line up with the version of their mother they've curated in their heads. It means your mother threw my life onto a wet lawn and expected the foundation to stay standing under her feet. She said you've been planning this, that you manipulated everything so she'd end up with nothing. She's right, I said, except for the word manipulate. I call it preparation. There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing, probably pacing in his apartment, torn between loyalty and logic. The first real crack in the narrative forming behind his eyes. This doesn't feel like you, he finally said. Then maybe you never saw me clearly. He flinched at that. I could hear it in the way the line went quiet again. Like someone dropped a tool on a workshop floor and realized it wasn't going to bounce back. Dad, you should have told me. Told you what? I said. That your mother has spent the last 10 years erasing me in 1,000 small ways while smiling for Christmas cards? That I've been living like a tenant in a house I paid for while she auditioned for the role of liberated woman in front of her yoga circle? That's not fair. Fair ended the night she locked the front door behind me while my underwear was still in a puddle on the lawn. Another silence. He wasn't ready to pick sides. Not yet. He was grasping for middle ground, but the ground itself was already gone. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a split. You could have handled this differently, he muttered. Finally. I did. For 29 years. He didn't have a response to that. Just shallow breathing and the flickering static of a man realizing his parents are not the people he built them to be. I don't know what to say, he said quietly. That's okay. I told him. You don't have to say anything. Just look. Ask questions. Follow the paper trail. And then, because it was time, I said, I have to go. Wait, Daddy. But I was already off the call. I didn't slam the phone. I didn't pour another drink. I just sat there, watching the wind bend the tall grass, listening to the guest house creak with age. For the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. Not because I'd been heard, but because the lie had started to leak. And there's no patching that hole once it's open. Janet was on the couch when the call came in, legs crossed, one hand swirling chilled rose while the other scrolled through comments on her latest post, a filtered shot of her laughing mid-toast with Charlene, captioned, redefining happiness wine glass dizzy. She just replied to a comment from someone named Deanna, you're glowing, girl, with a line of fire emojis and a winky face when the phone rang. Unknown caller, it read. She answered anyway. Victors don't scream. This is Janet Walker. A voice, professional, clipped, not unkind. Mrs. Walker, this is Jason Halpert, asset liaison with Fairgrove Bank. I'm calling regarding the property at 274 Rose Hill Lane. Her smile faltered. Yes. We're reaching out to coordinate access for appraisal purposes. The property has recently changed mortgage holders, and our next step is a site evaluation before the transition is finalized. I'm sorry. What? The mortgage was fully bought out by Fieldstone Revocable Trust. You're listed as a current occupant, but you are not on title or loan documents. We'll need access to the premises within 5 business days to begin processing the occupancy status. There was a long pause. The kind of pause where the air gets sucked out of a room and no one notices until the chest tightens. I think there's a mistake, she said, laughing light. Fake. That's my house. I understand this is a surprise, Jason said smoothly, like he'd said it before. But the trust has legally assumed control of the property, and your name does not appear on the deed, nor on the active loan. That's impossible, she said sharply. My husband, ex-husband, he lives in a shed. He doesn't even know how to refinance a car. Jason's tone didn't change. Mrs. Walker, all filings are on public record. The trust was established 2 years ago. Your signature was not required, as joint tenancy was never established on this property. She stood now. Wine sloshed in the glass. Wait a minute. Wait a goddamn minute. Are you saying I don't own my house? We're saying the house was never jointly owned. You've been residing there. Yes, but your name does not appear on any official ownership documents. Janet's jaw twitched. That's a trick. That's fraud. He tricked me. I understand this is emotional, Jason said, with the same tone someone might use with a panicking passenger on a flight. But everything was handled within legal bounds. And just to reiterate, Al, I want to speak to someone real. Not a voicemail reader. Not a scripted robot. Jason didn't flinch. Ma'am, the eviction notice is en route. We're required to deliver it in person, but we're providing you courtesy notice by phone. After appraisal, you'll have 30 days to vacate. Her hand gripped the back of the chair like she might snap the wood. I've lived in that house for 29 years. My clothes are there. My life is there. We understand. But the property has been legally reassigned. Silence. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels like drowning in your own expectations. She ended the call without saying goodbye. The wine glass hit the counter hard. Didn't break, but it sloshed red across the marble. She grabbed her phone, furious fingers opening her banking app. Access denied. Then the credit card app. Still frozen. A knock at the door startled her. She turned. No one. Just the wind blowing leaves across the porch. For the first time in decades, Janet Walker stood in her own living room and felt like a guest. The walls, once cozy, now looked like they were staring back. The photos, the curtains, the rug she picked out during their renewal weekend in Charleston, all of it suddenly felt on loan. She opened the drawer by the kitchen sink and fished out a utility bill. Electric, Fieldstone service routing. Water, Western Tier Systems. Even the fucking garbage pickup was under the trust. Her fingers trembled. And the irony? The man she humiliated in a flannel and slippers, the one she locked out like a stray dog, hadn't raised his voice once. Not one public scene. No messy Facebook posts. No calls to her sister. No threats. Just paperwork. Deadly, quiet, final. Janet turned into the driveway fast, too fast, kicking up a spray of gravel from the shoulder as her Lexus jerked to a stop. The calm, faux-zen voice of her yoga instructor was still echoing in her head. Exhale resistance. Inhale flow. Flow. What a joke. She didn't even put the car in park before lunging for the garage remote. Click. Nothing. She pressed it again. Harder. Like the force of her thumb would bully the door into compliance. Still nothing. She stared at it, mouth slightly open, as if waiting for the door to apologize. Then she slammed it against the steering wheel, tossed it into the passenger seat, and cursed out loud. Stupid damn trust. She yanked the key, stepped out into the humid air, and stormed toward the front door, heels clacking on the concrete. She paused at the mailbox out of habit. Inside sat a thick manila envelope. No postage, no return address, just her name, neatly printed, all caps, Janet Walker. She didn't open it. Not yet. Her gut was already telling her what it was. She just didn't want to see it in black and white. Not until she was inside, where things still felt like hers. The front door creaked open. No lock this time. He'd never changed the code, probably just revoked garage access. Petty. She stepped in and immediately called out. Walter. Silence. Of course. What was she expecting? For him to be curled on the couch, waiting to explain himself like a scared dog. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door and noticed the hallway light was off. Odd. That light was always on. She reached for the switch. Nothing. Dead. She flicked the others on the way to the kitchen. Nothing. 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 That's when the panic really started to crawl up her spine. The AC wasn't humming. The fridge wasn't buzzing. It was too quiet. She opened the envelope. The contents were methodical, brutally clear. A notarized letter from Fieldstone Trust, an affidavit of ownership, a property reassignment summary, and at the top, in heavy bold type, effective immediately, termination of residential occupancy. She scanned faster now, hands shaking, words jumping out at her like tripwires. Tenancy of convenience, non-owner occupant, marital interest waived and null under Section 4B. Trust enforcement requires full vacation of premises within 30 days. Legal occupants, 0. She dropped the letter. It landed with a soft rustle on the tile. She stood alone in the center of her open-concept kitchen, where just a month ago she'd hosted her fresh start brunch. Mimosas, avocados. She'd made a playlist called Freedom Vibes. And now? Now, the countertops looked sterile. The art on the walls looked staged. The smell of lavender diffuser sticks made her nauseous. This wasn't her home anymore. Hell, maybe it never was. She stumbled toward the hallway, calling his name again. Walter. Still nothing. She checked the bedroom. Empty. Checked the garage. His tools. Gone. Just a shadow on the pegboard where they used to hang like a soldier's uniform. Even his damn fishing hat, the one she used to mock, was gone. She turned back to the hallway. Looked at her reflection in the glass of the front door. She didn't look powerful anymore. She looked removed. And oh, she shrieked, and the echo rang down the hallway like a bell in an abandoned church. She grabbed the edge of the counter for balance. She had thrown him out to reclaim her independence, to show him she didn't need him, didn't want him, was above him. But now, here she stood, in a house built with his money, his foresight, his legal precision, and she was a guest in it. A squatter in her own fantasy. Her breath quickened. The room tilted. She stumbled back, landing hard against the wall, and slid down to the floor. Her phone buzzed. It was Charlene. OMG sis, are you okay? Just saw some post from this banker guy you tagged once. What's going on? She didn't respond. She couldn't. For the first time in decades, there was no script. No performative sorrow. No supportive audience. Just a hallway echoing with her scream. And Walter? Long gone. The tires on her Lexus crunched over the gravel with the same frantic rhythm as her thoughts. She hadn't slept. Hadn't eaten. She looked like she'd lost around with a mirror and then driven straight into a breakdown. No makeup. Sunglasses hiding swollen eyes. Hair pulled back into the same messy bun she used to mock tired wives for wearing. She hadn't planned to come here. She didn't even know where here was until she remembered the guest house, that forgotten footnote from a family funeral years ago. His uncle's land. The one she said was creepy and drafty and refused to visit. It was a throwaway line from the past, but now it felt like the only door left that might open. She slammed the car into park and stalked toward the porch. The wooden steps groaned under her weight, or maybe under her urgency. No doorbell, just her fist. She banged. Once, twice, 3 times. The door creaked open, slow and quiet. Walter stood there, wearing the same flannel she had thrown onto the lawn 7 days ago. Clean now. Pressed. Like nothing had ever happened. He stepped outside and shut the door behind him. Didn't invite her in. Didn't need to. She didn't belong there. Why are you doing this? She snapped, eyes wide, voice already trembling at the edge of breakdown. Walter looked at her like a man might look at a fogged-up window, trying to decide if it's worth cleaning or just walking past it. You made your choice, he said evenly. I'm just honoring it. Legally. Her mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't prepared for calm. She came expecting a confrontation. A desperate man. A wounded one. Instead, she was facing a man who had already finished mourning. You blindsided me. She barked, louder now, as if volume might reset history. You planned this. You've been scheming behind my back. How long, Walter? How long? 29 years, he said. She blinked. That landed harder than she expected. What does that mean? She demanded. It means I spent 29 years believing we were on the same team. Then one Tuesday, I came home and watched my life get flung into puddles while you posed for applause. Her voice cracked. I was overwhelmed, Walter. I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted. No, he cut in. You knew exactly what you wanted. Freedom. Control. A fresh start. You made it clear. And I listened. You locked me out of my own house. He cocked his head slightly. No. You locked me out of a house I bought. I just corrected the paperwork. She reached for some emotional weapon, a tear, a memory, a joke from years ago, but he gave her nothing. Not even a flicker. You could have told me, she said, quieter now, voice breaking. You could have warned me. Walter took a slow breath, then stepped off the porch, closing the distance between them by 2 paces, just enough for the words to land. You threw my life onto the lawn, he said. I just picked it up. She looked stunned. Small. The rage in her face started to collapse under something heavier. Regret? No. Fear. Real fear. The kind that sets in when the smoke clears and you realize you burned the bridge you're still standing on. I didn't think you'd actually fight back, she whispered. Walter's mouth curled, not quite a smile. I didn't. I prepared. She opened her mouth again, but he turned, walked back to the door, and opened it just enough to slip inside. He didn't slam it. He didn't even look back. Just the sound of the door closing, soft, absolute, as Janet stood there on someone else's gravel, choking on a truth she'd spent years pretending didn't exist. Walter had never been passive. He had just been patient. The knock came at 10:12 a.m. Janet sat at the kitchen table, the same place where she once hurled a mug across the room and told Walter he was suffocating her. The same table where she rehearsed her freedom speeches in front of Charlene, sipping wine and feeling 10 years younger. Now, the stemless glass in front of her held nothing but a smudge of yesterday's lipstick. The knock again, firmer this time. She hesitated, then rose, robe tied tight, bare feet cold against the tile. Outside stood a man in a windbreaker and khakis, holding a clipboard and an envelope sealed with a red wax stamp, the kind people use when they want to send a message. This is final. Delivery for Janet Walker, he said without looking up. She didn't sign, just took it. Back at the table, she sat down slowly, the envelope heavy in her hands like it had weight beyond paper. Her fingers trembled, not because she didn't know what was inside, but because she did. She peeled back the flap. The first page was clean, clinical, stamped at the bottom by the state. Deed transfer, Rose Hill property. Her name absent. Not erased, simply never present. The second page was worse. A court letter with a raised seal. Motion to deny marital interest, granted in full. Dated 3 months ago. Filed without contest. Processed. Final. She shuffled through the rest. A cover sheet from Fieldstone Trust confirming sale of the property to a third party. A wire receipt. A closing statement. And stapled to the back, a single-page contract. Her signature. From 2017. A post-nuptial agreement. Boilerplate. She remembered it vaguely. Walter told her it was for the estate, something to protect the family in case of probate complications. She hadn't read it. Not really. She was in a rush to meet friends for brunch. The same day she'd bought that stupid turquoise scarf she never wore. The clause was highlighted now. Spousal waiver of claim to real property assets held or acquired under irrevocable instruments. She didn't understand all the legal language, but the meaning was clear enough. She had signed herself out of the future. No alimony. No claim. No leverage. She stood up too fast, knocking her chair back. The envelope hit the floor. The wind from the open kitchen window rustled the papers like they were mocking her. She turned in circles like the room was closing in, as if the walls might whisper something she could use. But there was nothing. No Walter. No lawyers. Just consequences, surgical, quiet, and utterly complete. She staggered to the window. Outside, the lawn was perfect. Clean. Someone new had mowed it. The bushes were trimmed. There were no moving boxes. No sign of her past life. He had already sold the house. She reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over his name. Still saved as Walt Redhart, a relic she never updated. But the screen showed what she feared. Number disconnected. She scrolled. Checked social media. His profiles? Gone. No photos. No trace. The silence screamed louder than any fight they'd ever had. Then a text came in. It was from Eric. He told me. About everything. He said the money from the house is going into a trust. For the grandkids. Mom, he's really not coming back. She sank into the chair, the same one she once threw across the room in a tantrum when Walter came home late from work, reeking of engine grease and patience. But now there was no one to yell at, no one to manipulate, no one left to charm. Just her, and the bank manager's copy.
The sunlight streaming through the grand cathedral windows felt oppressive, almost blinding, as I adjusted the tie that suddenly felt like a noose around my neck. Amanda, my sister, stood at the altar, glowing with happiness as she exchanged vows with her new husband. The air was thick with the perfume of roses and the buzz of joyful whispers, but I couldn't shake the unease that had been growing in the pit of my stomach since we arrived. Emily, my youngest daughter, sat beside me, fidgeting with the hem of her dress. Her voice, sweet but insistent, broke through my thoughts. "Daddy," she said, her words casual but loaded with an innocence that made them hit harder. "Why does Uncle Mark look like me?" For a second, the world seemed to tilt. I turned to her, my heart thundering in my chest, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "What did you say?" Emily giggled, as if her question was the most natural thing in the world. "Uncle Mark. Mommy says he has my eyes and my smile, but you don't. Isn't that funny?" The room spun. I forced myself to laugh, a hollow sound that felt foreign in my own throat. "That's interesting, sweetheart." I glanced up instinctively, scanning the room for Melissa, my wife of 15 years. She was near the front, talking to one of Amanda's bridesmaids. Her expression animated, her smile dazzling as always, but something about her posture seemed too perfect, too controlled. My gaze shifted to Mark, my brother-in-law, standing just a few feet away. His easy grin, the confident way he leaned against the pew, suddenly seemed unbearably smug. I looked closer. My daughter's words echoed in my head. The shape of his jaw, the slight tilt of his nose, the glint in his eyes when he smiled. I hadn't noticed it before, but now it was impossible to unsee. Emily wasn't wrong. There was a resemblance I couldn't explain. The ceremony carried on, but I was barely present. My thoughts raced, colliding into one another in a frenzy. Was this some cruel coincidence? A child's innocent misunderstanding? Or was there something buried beneath her words? Something that had been right in front of me all along? When the priest pronounced Amanda and her husband as newlyweds, the room erupted in applause. I clapped along, my hands numb, my mind miles away. Melissa turned briefly and caught my eye. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered, waving at me as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I didn't know what was real anymore, but I knew one thing. I was going to find out. The car ride home from the wedding was suffocatingly silent. Emily was asleep in the back seat, her tiny hand clutching the stuffed bunny she refused to part with, while Melissa sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone. I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach or the pounding in my chest. Her words, Emily's words, were like a splinter in my mind, pricking at memories I'd dismissed over the years. The jokes, the looks, the moments I had shrugged off as unimportant now resurfaced with unnerving clarity. I thought back to a Christmas dinner years ago. Mark had walked into the living room, holding a giggling 3-year-old Emily on his shoulders. My mother had laughed, shaking her head. "Mark, she's your little twin," she'd said, her tone lighthearted. Everyone had laughed, including me. Melissa had laughed the loudest. I had chalked it up to a silly family observation, the kind people make without thinking. But now, it felt like a puzzle piece I had ignored because I didn't know there was a puzzle to begin with. And then there was that barbecue at Mark's place last summer. Emily had been sitting on Mark's lap, chattering about her favorite cartoons, while he listened intently. Melissa had been nearby, watching them with an odd smile, proud but also tense. I remember someone, maybe Amanda, joking, "Careful, Mark. People will start saying she's yours." Melissa's laughter had been sharp, almost forced, and she had quickly changed the subject, dragging me into a conversation about grill recipes. At the time, I had been oblivious. I hadn't thought anything of it. But now, those moments replayed in my head with brutal clarity, pieces falling into place, forming an ugly picture I couldn't ignore. Melissa's voice snapped me back to the present. "You've been quiet," she said, her tone casual, but there was an edge to it. Too casual, too rehearsed. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Just tired." She didn't buy it. I could tell by the way her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her purse. "The wedding was beautiful, wasn't it?" Amanda looked stunning. "She did," I replied flatly. There was a beat of silence. Then, almost too quickly, she added, "And Emily had a great time. She loves her Uncle Mark." The mention of Mark felt like a slap. I glanced at her, catching the way her eyes darted away from mine, her fingers tapping nervously against her thigh. "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "She really does." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for the rest of the ride, she didn't say another word. The tension in the car was suffocating, like we were both walking on the edge of a cliff, waiting for one wrong step to send us plummeting. That night, after Melissa fell asleep, I sat in the living room, staring at the dim glow of the TV. My thoughts churned, dragging me into a spiral I couldn't escape. Something wasn't adding up. The signs had been there all along, subtle, easy to overlook, but now glaringly obvious. I had ignored them because I trusted her. I trusted my wife. But Emily's innocent question had cracked something inside me, and now, the doubts were spreading like wildfire. I didn't know what I was going to do, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. Whatever this was, whatever Melissa was hiding, I was going to uncover it. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought consuming my mind. I needed answers. The doubt gnawed at me, a relentless ache I couldn't ignore. Melissa moved around the kitchen, humming as she prepared breakfast, the picture of a loving wife and mother. But every movement, every glance in my direction, felt calculated, as if she knew I was watching her more closely now. Emily sat at the table, munching on cereal, her bunny tucked under one arm. She was completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me, and I hated that I had to use her innocence to chase the truth. But I couldn't live in the dark anymore. I needed proof. "Sweetheart, can I see your bunny for a minute?" I asked her casually, reaching over to grab it. Emily hesitated, clutching the toy tighter. "Why?" "Just want to make sure it's not getting dirty," I said, keeping my tone light. "Don't want it falling apart on you." She reluctantly handed it over, and I pretended to inspect it for loose stitching. What I was really looking for was a stray hair, anything that could give me a sample. And there it was, caught in the fabric of the bunny's ear, a strand of golden brown hair that matched Emily's perfectly. "Looks good as new," I said, handing it back with a smile. She beamed at me, none the wiser. Melissa's eyes flicked up from the stove, narrowing slightly. "What's with the sudden interest in her bunny?" she asked, her voice casual, but her expression anything but. "Just being a dad," I said with a shrug. Can't let her favorite toy fall apart, right? She didn't respond, but the way she turned back to the stove felt too abrupt, too deliberate. My pulse quickened. Did she know what I was planning? No, that wasn't possible. I hadn't said a word. Still, something about her demeanor put me on edge. Later that day, while Melissa took Emily out to run errands, I sealed the hair in a small plastic bag and drove to a clinic I'd found online. It offered discreet DNA testing, no questions asked. I handed over the sample, my hands shaking slightly, and filled out the paperwork. They told me the results would take a week. A week. 7 days of uncertainty, of pretending everything was normal when I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, the ground crumbling beneath me. Back at home, the tension between Melissa and me began to grow. She seemed to sense that something was different, though she didn't confront me directly. Instead, her usual warmth gave way to irritation, her patience wearing thin over the smallest things. "Why didn't you take the trash out like I asked?" she snapped one evening, her tone sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I've been busy," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Work's been hectic," she scoffed, shaking her head. "You've been busy a lot lately. What's going on with you?" I wanted to turn the question back on her, to demand answers about what was going on with her, but I bit my tongue. I couldn't reveal my suspicions yet, not without proof. Instead, I shrugged. "Just tired, that's all." Her eyes lingered on me, searching for something, and then she dropped it. But her behavior only grew more erratic in the days that followed. She started snapping at Emily over minor things. Spilled juice, toys left out in the living room, and avoided conversations about anything remotely personal. One night, as I came home from work, I found her sitting in the dark, staring at her phone. When she noticed me, she quickly locked the screen and shoved the phone into her pocket. "You okay?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Fine," she said curtly, standing up and brushing past me. "I'm going to bed." Melissa had always been composed, careful, but now her composure was cracking, and it only fueled my resolve. Whatever she was hiding, she was scared of me finding out, and soon I would. A week had never felt so long. Every hour dragged, each minute stretching like an eternity as I waited for the email with the test results. I told myself over and over that it was probably nothing, that I was overreacting. But no amount of self-reassurance could drown out the relentless drumbeat of doubt in my mind. The email arrived late on a Friday night. Melissa was upstairs, putting Emily to bed, and the house was eerily quiet except for the occasional murmur of their voices. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop and logged into the clinic's secure portal. There it was, the result. My stomach churned as I read the words. Probability of paternity. 0%. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, and the room seemed to tilt. I stared at the screen, hoping I had misread it, that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the words didn't change. They were permanent, cold, and final. Emily was not my daughter. The weight of the truth hit me like a freight train. I slumped back in my chair, my mind reeling. Emily, my sweet, innocent Emily, who called me daddy and trusted me with her whole heart, wasn't mine. The betrayal was so profound, so deeply rooted, that it threatened to swallow me whole. But it didn't stop there. My thoughts spiraled further, piecing together the hints and suspicions I'd tried so hard to suppress. If Emily wasn't mine, what about Sarah? What about Ben? Were they my children, or had my entire life been built on a lie? And then there was Mark. Mark, with his easy smile and the uncanny resemblance to Emily that I had ignored for so long. Mark, who had always been a little too close to Melissa, a little too attentive to her needs. My mind raced through every interaction, every glance they had exchanged when they thought no one was watching. It all made sense now. The way Melissa had laughed too loudly at his jokes, the way she had avoided conversations about Emily's resemblance to him, the way Mark had always gone out of his way to dote on Emily. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together with sickening clarity. I thought about the wedding, about Emily's innocent question, "Why does Uncle Mark look like me?" The answer had been staring me in the face all along. Mark wasn't just her uncle. He was her father. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to look at the screen any longer. My chest heaved with a mix of anger, grief, and disbelief. The walls of my house, my home, suddenly felt like a prison. Every picture on the wall, every piece of furniture, every toy scattered on the floor was a reminder of the life I thought I had, the family I thought was mine. Melissa came downstairs a few minutes later, her expression tired but serene. "Emily's asleep," she said softly, not noticing the storm brewing in my eyes. She reached for her phone on the counter, scrolling through her messages like it was any other night. I stared at her, my fists clenched at my sides. How could she stand there so casually, so effortlessly, knowing what she had done? Knowing the lies she had built our life upon? "Melissa," I said, my voice low and strained. She glanced up, startled by my tone. "What is it?" I opened my mouth to confront her, to demand answers, but the words caught in my throat. Not yet. Not until I had the full truth. Not until I knew just how deep her betrayal went. "Nothing," I said finally, my voice flat. "I'm going for a walk." Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she didn't believe me, but she didn't press. I grabbed my jacket and left the house, the cool night air doing little to calm the fire burning inside me. The truth was out, but the battle had only just begun. The idea struck me late at night, as I paced the living room in the dim light. If I wanted the truth, I had to force Melissa and Mark into a situation where they couldn't control the narrative. I needed to see their reactions under pressure. And what better way to do that than in front of the entire family? The next morning, I suggested hosting a family dinner. Melissa's face lit up at the idea. "That's a great way to catch up with everyone," she said, her tone breezy. But I noticed the way she avoided my eyes, how her hands fidgeted with the edge of her coffee mug. She wasn't as casual as she wanted me to believe. By the time Friday rolled around, the dining table was set with Melissa's best dishes, and the house was filled with the aroma of roast chicken and baked potatoes. The kids were excited, chattering about seeing Uncle Mark and Aunt Amanda. Meanwhile, I kept my composure, letting Melissa take the lead as the perfect hostess. Mark and Amanda arrived first. Mark walked in with his usual confidence, carrying a bottle of wine and cracking jokes. Amanda seemed oblivious, smiling and chatting with Melissa as they set the wine on the counter. But Mark's demeanor shifted ever so slightly when he saw me. There was something guarded in his expression, a flicker of discomfort that he quickly masked with a wide grin. Dinner began like any other family gathering. Laughter filled the room as stories were shared. The kids ran around the table, and wine glasses were refilled. But I had a plan, and I wasn't leaving the evening without answers. "So, Mark," I said, casually leaning back in my chair, "you've always been great with the kids. Emily especially. She absolutely adores you." Melissa's fork paused midair for the briefest moment before she continued eating. Mark laughed nervously. "What can I say? She's a great kid." "She is," I agreed, swirling my wine glass. "Funny thing, though, people keep saying she looks more like you than me. Isn't that interesting?" The table went quiet for a beat too long. Melissa's smile froze, and her eyes darted toward Mark, whose laughter now sounded forced. "Kids pick up traits from everyone," Melissa said quickly, her voice overly cheerful. "It's probably just the family genes." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Strange, though. I don't see much of myself in her at all." Melissa shot me a sharp look, her composure cracking for a split second. "Jacob, what are you getting at?" "Nothing," I said with a shrug. "Just making an observation." Mark shifted in his seat, his usual charm replaced with a tension that was impossible to miss. He reached for his wine glass, his hand trembling slightly. "Kids are funny that way," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. The conversation moved on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Melissa tried to steer the discussion towards safer topics, asking Amanda about her honeymoon plans and complimenting her dress. But I wasn't done. Later, as dessert was served, I leaned forward, my tone light but deliberate. "Mark, remember that barbecue last summer? Emily wouldn't leave your side the entire day. You must have some magic touch with kids." Mark's face turned a shade paler, and his smile faltered. "Yeah, she's a sweet kid," he said, his voice strained. Melissa jumped in before I could press further. "She loves her family. That's all it is," she said firmly, her eyes daring me to push the topic any more. But the damage was done. Mark was visibly rattled, and Melissa's nerves were fraying at the edges. They thought they were in control, but their reactions were telling a different story. As the night wound down and the guests began to leave, Melissa pulled me aside in the kitchen. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, her tone low but furious. "What was what?" I replied, feigning ignorance. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she snapped. The questions, the little jabs at Mark. "What's wrong with you?" I stared at her, my face calm but my mind racing. "Nothing's wrong, Melissa. I was just making conversation." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't press further. Instead, she turned away, muttering under her breath as she busied herself with the dishes. Mark, on the other hand, left the house looking like he'd seen a ghost. As he hugged Emily goodbye, his hand lingered on her shoulder for a moment too long, his eyes flicking toward me with a mix of guilt and fear. I watched them drive away, my jaw clenched. The cracks were showing, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. I was ready. Let them think they had survived the night. The real confrontation was just beginning. The second family dinner was a calculated trap, and I was done playing subtle. This time, I was in control, and I was ready to set fire to the lies that had woven themselves into my life. Melissa, of course, had no idea. She thought she'd smooth things over after the last dinner, that I'd dropped whatever suspicions I had. Mark must have thought the same. Fools. The dining room was lively, filled with chatter and the clinking of glasses. Emily was playing with her cousins in the living room, and Sarah and Ben were sneaking extra helpings of dessert in the kitchen. It was perfect, too perfect. The kind of moment that begged for chaos. I waited until everyone was seated, the air thick with the aroma of roast beef and garlic potatoes. The adults laughed at some anecdote Amanda was sharing about her honeymoon, but I wasn't listening. I was focused, watching Melissa and Mark, studying every glance, every twitch of their expressions. They looked relaxed, too relaxed. It was time to change that. I cleared my throat, standing up from my seat. The room quieted almost immediately, all eyes turning to me. "I have something to say," I began, my voice calm but firm. Melissa shot me a confused look, her smile faltering. "Jacob, can it wait? We're in the middle of dinner." "No," I said, my tone cutting through the air like a blade. "It can't." The tension was instant, the kind that silenced even the kids in the next room. Mark shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around his fork. Melissa's eyes darted to him for the briefest moment before snapping back to me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," I continued, my gaze locking on Melissa. "About family, about trust, and about the things we take for granted." "Jacob," Melissa interjected, her voice sharp now. "What are you talking about?" I ignored her. "You know what's funny? DNA tests. Amazing things, really. They can tell you a lot about yourself, about your heritage, and, most importantly, about your children." The blood drained from Melissa's face. Her fork clattered against her plate, her hand trembling as she reached for her glass of wine. "What are you trying to say?" she demanded, her voice rising. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table, my eyes boring into hers. "I'm saying Emily isn't my daughter." The room exploded. Gasps filled the air as Amanda dropped her knife, and my mother clutched her chest in shock. Mark froze, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But it was Melissa's reaction I was waiting for. "You're insane!" she screamed, jumping to her feet. "How dare you accuse me of something like that? You're paranoid, Jacob. This is disgusting." I stayed calm, letting her venom spill out. "Am I?" I asked, my voice steady. "Because the test says otherwise." Melissa's eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, someone to take her side. But the room was silent, every face filled with a mixture of confusion and horror. "You're lying," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You've lost your mind." Mark tried to slip out of his chair, but I was faster. "Sit down," I barked, my voice slicing through the chaos like a whip. He froze, his eyes wide with fear. "You have nothing," Melissa shrieked. "This is just your sick way of trying to control me." I straightened, fixing her with a stare that made her recoil. "You're right, Melissa. I don't have anything on you. Yet. But Mark." I turned to him, my tone lethal. He doesn't look so confident anymore. Mark's face was a mask of panic. He opened his mouth to deny it, but no words came out. Instead, he glanced at Melissa, and that was all it took. That single, damning glance. What the hell, Mark? Amanda's voice cut through the silence, trembling with rage. What is he talking about? It's not what it looks like, Mark stammered, his voice shaking. Melissa screamed, Don't you dare say another word. But it was too late. The guilt was written all over his face. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean for this to happen. The room erupted again. Amanda stormed out, sobbing, while my mother shouted for someone to explain what was going on. Melissa turned on Mark, her fury spilling out like a dam breaking. You idiot, she screeched. You've ruined everything. But I didn't say another word. I just stood there, watching as their carefully constructed lies came crashing down around them. This was just the beginning, and they both knew it. The house felt hollow after the confrontation, as though the walls themselves were mocking me. Melissa hadn't spoken to me since the dinner, locking herself in the guest room, while Mark had disappeared, leaving Amanda to pick up the shattered pieces of their marriage. I could still hear her sobs echoing in my head, but they were nothing compared to the storm raging in my own mind. I couldn't stop myself from going further. Emily wasn't my daughter, that much I knew, but I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that the betrayal didn't end there. Every memory, every fleeting comment or glance over the years, now seemed suspicious. The seed of doubt planted by Emily's DNA test had grown into an all-consuming need to uncover the full truth. Sarah was next, my eldest daughter. At 16, she was fiercely independent and had always been the spitting image of Melissa, or so I thought. But now, as I studied the few pictures of her as a toddler, I noticed the subtleties I'd ignored before. Her features were softer, her hair a shade darker than mine, her smile familiar, but not in a way that matched either Melissa or me. It was the kind of familiarity that unsettled me, the kind that made my stomach churn. I didn't tell Melissa what I was doing. She would have tried to stop me, or worse, manipulate me into believing I was crazy. Instead, I took a sample of Sarah's hair from her hairbrush when no one was looking and sent it to the same clinic. The waiting was unbearable, but the anger kept me fueled. I didn't even try to hide my coldness toward Melissa anymore. She knew I was digging, and instead of trying to appease me, she'd become brazen. Dig all you want, Jacob, she'd said one night, standing in the doorway with a wine glass in hand, a smirk playing on her lips. You think you're going to find some grand conspiracy? Go ahead. Waste your time. It's pathetic, really. I didn't respond. Her words were bait, meant to provoke me, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I walked past her, leaving her to stew in her smugness. But her confidence only made me more determined. What was she so sure I wouldn't find? What had she been hiding all these years? The results came back late one night. Sarah wasn't my daughter either. The world stopped. I sat in the dark, staring at the words on the screen, my hands trembling. It wasn't just Emily. It was Sarah too. My family, my life had been a lie from the very beginning. I thought I couldn't feel more broken than I had after the first test. But this was a new kind of devastation. 2 of my children, 2 innocent lives I had loved and raised, weren't mine. The betrayal burned hotter now. If Melissa was capable of this, what else had she lied about? How far did her deceit go? I closed the laptop, my breath ragged as rage coursed through me. I couldn't sit in silence any longer. I stormed into the guest room, where Melissa was lounging on the bed, scrolling through her phone as though nothing had happened. She didn't even look up when I entered. Sarah isn't mine either, I said, my voice low but deadly. Her smirk returned, and she finally set her phone down. Took you long enough. Her words hit like a slap. You knew? I asked, my voice trembling with fury. You knew this whole time? She leaned back against the headboard, her expression infuriatingly smug. Of course I knew. Do you think I'm stupid? I took a step closer, my fists clenched. How could you do this? How could you lie to me for years and let me believe they were mine? Her laugh was cold and sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. Because you're weak, Jacob. You've always been weak. You were so desperate to play the perfect husband and father that you never questioned anything. You wanted your little fantasy, and I let you have it. I stared at her, disbelief and anger warring inside me. They're innocent kids, Melissa. Our kids. How could you drag them into this? Her smile faded, replaced by something darker. They're my kids, Jacob. You're just the placeholder. Always have been. And you're not going to do a damn thing about it. Her words were venom, each one cutting deeper than the last. But it was the casual cruelty in her tone, the way she laughed at my pain, that shattered the last shred of restraint I had left. You think I won't do anything? I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. You think I'll just roll over and let you get away with this? Melissa stood, her smirk returning. She stepped closer, her voice dripping with disdain. What are you going to do, Jacob? Cry about it? Run to your lawyer? Go ahead. Try. But you'll never beat me. You're too weak. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The fire inside me had turned cold, transforming into a resolve I'd never felt before. She thought she'd won, thought I was powerless. But she was wrong. So very wrong. The days after Melissa's confession were a haze of anger, disbelief, and crushing despair. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. The house, once filled with memories I cherished, now felt like a graveyard of lies. Every picture on the wall mocked me. Every laugh from the children was a reminder of what I'd lost. Not them, but the truth of what I thought we were. I spent hours sitting alone in the living room, replaying every moment of our life together, searching for signs I should have seen. Her smiles, her touch, the way she'd look at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. It had all been a mask. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it left me questioning not just her, but myself. Had I been so blind, so desperate to believe in the life we'd built that I ignored what was right in front of me? The truth was unbearable. I wasn't just betrayed. I had been a willing participant in my own deception. But anger started to creep in, overtaking the sadness. It came in waves, sharp and all-consuming, burning through the fog of despair. I punched the wall one night, my fist splitting the plaster, but the pain didn't feel like enough. I wanted to scream, to rage, to destroy something as thoroughly as Melissa had destroyed me. Still, beneath the anger was something more insidious. Humiliation. I had played the fool, parading around as the devoted husband, the doting father, while Melissa laughed behind my back. And Mark, the audacity of him sitting at my table, holding my children, while knowing the truth, it made my blood boil. The humiliation of it all cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. But even in my darkest moments, I couldn't stay there. I couldn't give Melissa the satisfaction of breaking me completely. If I gave up, she won. And I couldn't let that happen. One night, as the house lay silent, I made a choice. I wasn't going to let her take anything else from me. Not my dignity, not my future, and certainly not my children. She had played her game for years, but now it was my turn. And I wasn't going to play fair. I sat down at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen, my mind racing with possibilities. The first thing I needed was information. The truth. All of it. If Emily and Sarah weren't mine, then I needed to know about Ben, my middle child. Was he the last thread of truth in this nightmare, or just another part of the lie? I jotted down every step I needed to take. Another DNA test, meetings with lawyers, documenting everything I could about Melissa's betrayal. Her words from that night rang in my ears. You'll never beat me. You're too weak. Weak. The word twisted in my gut, fueling the fire that now burned hotter than ever. She thought she'd beaten me, thought I was a broken man who would simply crumble under the weight of her lies. But she didn't know me. Not really. She didn't know the lengths I was willing to go to protect what mattered. I spent hours researching custody laws, infidelity clauses in divorce settlements, how to gather evidence that would stand up in court. If Melissa thought she held all the cards, she was wrong. Every move she'd made, every lie she'd told, was a string I could pull, and I was going to unravel her web until there was nothing left. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about reclaiming the life she had stolen from me. The kids were innocent in all of this. Emily and Sarah weren't mine by blood, but they were still my daughters in every way that mattered. I had raised them, loved them, been there for them every step of the way. Melissa might have lied to me, but the love I had for those girls wasn't a lie, and I wasn't going to let her twist that into something ugly. As the sun began to rise, I closed the notebook and sat back, exhaustion washing over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I was hurt, yes, betrayed, humiliated, but I wasn't defeated. Melissa had underestimated me. She thought I was weak, but she was about to learn just how wrong she was. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The first step in my plan was to get someone who could help me navigate this minefield legally. The morning after my decision, I called a lawyer, one I'd been recommended by a trusted friend. Attorney Lauren Price specialized in high-conflict divorces, and I needed someone ruthless. Sitting in her office, I laid everything out. The DNA results, Melissa's confession, my suspicions about Ben, and the years of betrayal. Lauren listened intently, her sharp eyes narrowing as I spoke. "This is a tangled mess," she said finally, leaning back in her chair. "But you're not powerless, Jacob. If you're ready to fight, we can build a case. It won't be quick, and it won't be easy, but we can expose everything." "I'm ready," I said firmly, my voice steady. "Whatever it takes." "Good," she replied, her tone brisk. "The first thing we need is evidence. Real evidence. Not just your word against hers. Gather anything you can. Texts, emails, financial records. If she's been this deceitful, chances are she's left a trail. We're going to follow it." With Lauren's guidance, I started digging into every corner of Melissa's life. Her phone habits had always been guarded, so I didn't bother trying to snoop there. Instead, I focused on her financial records. Bank statements, credit card bills. Anything that could hint at where she'd been and who she'd been with. It didn't take long to find discrepancies. Payments to fancy hotels, charges from restaurants I'd never heard of, and gifts I'd never seen. All hidden under vague entries in her online banking. It was a start, but I needed more. That's where Mark came in. The man had always exuded arrogance, but after our explosive dinner confrontation, he was shaken. Amanda had all but kicked him out of their home, though he'd managed to worm his way back in temporarily with promises of redemption. I knew his marriage was hanging by a thread, and that gave me leverage. One evening, I waited until Melissa was out of the house before calling Mark. My voice was cold, calculated. "Jacob," he answered, his tone hesitant. "What do you want?" "I think you already know," I said. "We both know what happened, Mark. You're just as guilty as Melissa. But here's the difference. I don't have to keep quiet about it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Are you threatening me?" he asked finally, his voice trembling. "Not threatening, Mark. Just stating facts. I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow, and I'm gathering evidence. If you don't help me, everything comes out. And when I say everything, I mean everything, including what Amanda doesn't know yet. Leave her out of this," he snapped, but there was panic in his voice. "That's up to you," I said. "If you help me prove Melissa's betrayal, if you give me what I need, I'll make sure Amanda doesn't hear it from me. But if you stonewall me, I won't hold back." I could almost hear him weighing his options, his breaths shallow and uneven. He knew I wasn't bluffing. His silence stretched on for so long that I thought he'd hung up, but then he sighed heavily. "What do you want?" he asked finally, defeat in his voice. "I want everything you know," I said. "Dates, places, details. How long this has been going on. Anything I can use to show Melissa's pattern of deceit. If you have texts, emails, anything that proves she's been lying to me, I want it." Mark groaned. "You don't understand what you're asking. If I do this, she'll destroy me." "She's already destroyed me," I said sharply. "And if you don't help, I'll make sure she takes you down with her." The line went quiet again before Mark finally relented. "Fine," he said, "but this stays between us. If Amanda finds out." "She won't as long as you deliver," I interrupted. "You have 48 hours. I hung up, my heart pounding. Mark was a coward, but his desperation was useful. If he followed through, I'd have exactly what I needed to build my case against Melissa. The next 2 days were a blur of action. I continued combing through records, snapping photos of anything suspicious, and cataloging every detail. When Mark sent me a folder of incriminating texts between him and Melissa, dates, times, and even pictures, my stomach turned. The sheer audacity of their affair was nauseating, but it also strengthened my resolve. With Lauren guiding me and Mark reluctantly feeding me information, I began to see the threads of Melissa's lies unraveling. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice for the kids, for the years she had stolen from me, and for the man she thought she could destroy. Melissa didn't know it yet, but her days of control were over. This was my game now, and I was going to win. The family gathered again, this time at my mother's house. It was supposed to be a casual Sunday lunch, a tradition we'd kept alive for years, but this one was different. Everyone could feel it. The air was heavy with unspoken tension, thick enough to choke on. Melissa sat beside me, her face calm, her smile picture-perfect. If she was nervous, she didn't show it. But I knew better. She always thrived on control, and today she had none. Mark was there too, sitting across from me, avoiding my gaze. Amanda hadn't forgiven him, not really, but she'd allowed him to stay, for now. He looked like a man on the edge, sweating bullets and gripping his glass of water like it was his lifeline. Melissa and Mark had no idea what I had planned, and that was the point. As everyone finished their meals and settled into casual conversation, I stood, tapping my glass lightly with a spoon. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to me. "I need everyone's attention," I said, my voice steady but commanding. "I have something important to share." Melissa's head snapped toward me, her eyes narrowing. "Jacob, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice sweet but edged with warning. I ignored her, focusing on the room. For years, I thought I had the perfect family. A loving wife, wonderful children, a life I was proud of. But I've come to learn that not everything is as it seems. "Jacob, stop," Melissa hissed, her composure slipping as she reached for my arm. I stepped away from her grasp, my resolve unshaken. "This isn't just about me," I continued, holding the room's attention. "It's about trust, about betrayal, and about the lies that can destroy everything we hold dear." The murmurs started then, confusion spreading among my family. Amanda looked at Mark, her face pale, while my mother frowned, her hands wringing nervously. I pulled out the envelope containing the DNA test results and held it up. I had suspicions, so I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I got a DNA test. Melissa froze, her face draining of color. For the first time, she looked afraid. "Jacob," she said sharply, her voice rising. "Don't you dare." "Oh, I dare," I shot back, my voice cutting through the room. I opened the envelope and pulled out the results. "Emily is not my daughter. Sarah is not my daughter." Gasps filled the room. Amanda covered her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. My mother let out a small cry, her hand clutching her chest. Melissa stood then, her chair screeching against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice shrill. "You're out of your mind, Jacob. Those tests are fake." I smiled coldly, reaching into my pocket to pull out my phone. "Fake, you say? Let's see what Mark has to say about that." Mark's head shot up, his face a mask of panic. "Jacob, don't." I pressed play on the recording. Melissa's voice filled the room, venomous and mocking. "They're my kids, Jacob. You're just the placeholder. Always have been. And you're not going to do a damn thing about it." The room erupted. Amanda stood, trembling, as tears streamed down her face. "Mark, what the hell is this?" she screamed, turning on him. "You knew? You knew?" Mark stammered, his hands raised in a feeble attempt to calm her. "Amanda, I can explain." "Explain?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "Explain what? That you're a liar? That you've been sleeping with his wife?" Melissa tried to regain control, stepping forward, her hands outstretched. "Jacob, this isn't fair. You're twisting things." I interrupted her with the final blow. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Here's fair." I pulled out printed copies of the texts Mark had sent Melissa, their conversations dripping with arrogance and deceit. I tossed them onto the table, the pages spreading like wildfire. My mother, still seated, shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Melissa," she whispered, her voice broken. "How could you? Melissa's facade shattered then. She turned on me, her face twisted with rage. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You think exposing this will make you look like the victim? You're pathetic, Jacob. Weak. That's why this happened. Because you're not enough." But her venom didn't land. The family was no longer on her side. Amanda stormed out, dragging Mark behind her, her voice echoing through the house as she screamed at him. My mother refused to look at Melissa, her disappointment palpable. I took a deep breath, looking at the woman I had once loved. "You thought I wouldn't fight back," I said quietly. "You thought I'd just accept your lies and let you keep walking all over me. But you were wrong. This is over." Melissa stared at me, her chest heaving, but she said nothing. She knew it was over too. As I walked out of the house that day, I felt a strange sense of peace. I'd lost so much, but I'd gained something back, myself. And that was a victory Melissa could never take away. The dust settled slowly after that explosive day. Melissa tried to salvage what little control she had left, but her grip on the narrative slipped through her fingers. I filed for divorce the following morning, and my lawyer, Lauren, handled the rest with cold precision. There was no reconciliation, no heartfelt apologies. Melissa's lies had burned every bridge, leaving nothing but ashes behind. The children, Emily, Sarah, and Ben, were the hardest part. I loved them, but the truth was undeniable. Our bond was built on a lie. Melissa's betrayal had poisoned everything, and I couldn't stay in their lives without being a constant reminder of the chaos she had caused. I made the painful decision to walk away. It wasn't easy. It never would be, but it was necessary. I packed my things and moved out of the house we'd shared, leaving behind the memories, both good and bad. The first few weeks were the hardest. The quiet was deafening, the absence of their laughter cutting deeper than I'd expected. But I knew I couldn't start over while clinging to the remnants of a life that wasn't truly mine. I threw myself into rebuilding one step at a time. I moved into a modest apartment in a new city, far enough away to avoid running into anyone from my old life. I took up running, joined a local gym, and even started learning to cook, something Melissa had always claimed I was hopeless at. It was messy at first, but there was something satisfying about creating something for myself, no matter how simple. Work became my anchor. I took on new challenges, poured my focus into projects that gave me a sense of purpose. Slowly but surely, the pain dulled. The humiliation, the anger, the sadness, they didn't disappear, but they stopped defining me. I was more than what Melissa had done to me. I refused to let her betrayal dictate the rest of my life. Months passed, and I heard through the grapevine how things were unraveling for those who had wronged me. Mark's marriage to Amanda didn't survive. She'd thrown him out after uncovering even more infidelities, and he was now living in a rundown apartment, struggling to make ends meet. His charm had worn thin, and without Amanda's support, he was floundering. Melissa's life, too, took a sharp turn. She tried to maintain her image, but the truth had a way of catching up to her. Word of the affair spread, tarnishing her reputation in the community. She lost friends, social standing, and even job opportunities. The confident, manipulative woman who once controlled everything now found herself isolated, her lies and arrogance finally catching up with her. And the kids? I kept tabs on them from a distance, through mutual acquaintances and social media. They were doing as well as could be expected, though I knew they were struggling to understand why their world had fallen apart. Melissa's selfishness had hurt them too, and that guilt lingered in the back of my mind. But I also knew staying in their lives would have caused more harm than good. As for me, I started to thrive in ways I hadn't thought possible. I made new friends, built a life that was mine and mine alone. I even started dating again, cautiously at first. Trust didn't come easily after everything I'd been through, but I learned to open up, little by little. One evening, as I watched the sunset from my apartment balcony, I realized how far I'd come. Melissa's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it hadn't. I had survived. I had rebuilt. And for the first time in years, I felt free. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Life doesn't end when someone betrays you. It shifts, it breaks, but it can be rebuilt. You just have to be willing to let go of the things that no longer serve you, even if it hurts. As for Melissa and Mark, their downfall wasn't my doing, it was theirs, and that was justice enough for me.